Well, the staff of the D.C. magazine The Washingtonian went on a publishing strike in response to their CEO wondering publicly about the erosion of office culture and possibly changing employment statuses as remote work continues. Kathy Merrill writing in a Washington Post opinion piece, quoting, management has a strong incentive to change their status to contractor. Instead of receiving a set salary, contractors are paid only for the work they do, either hourly or by appropriate output metrics. That would also mean not having to pay for health care, a 401k match, and our share of FICA and Medicare taxes, benefits that in my company's case add up roughly to an extra 15% of compensation. So let's try to answer the question, is it legal? With attorney Kelly Hyman and criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Welcome to you both. Brian, I want to bring you into this first because Kathy Merrill went on to say, right after she got some pushback, quoting, my intent was to write about how worried I and other CEOs are about preserving the cultures we built up in our offices. But I understand that some of you have read it as threatening. So is it threatening or is it just notifying employees of the potential risk of staying home?
Yeah. Trace, great to see you again. Boy, I wonder how first responders are feeling. I wonder how essential workers are feeling, like nurses, doctors, grocery workers who went to work every single day during the pandemic, some saving lives. And here we have staff workers sitting out for a day, jeopardizing their job because the CEO actually wrote something that's legal. She hasn't done anything illegal, Trace. She can state that if an employee is, for example, not working 40 hours a week, then the status goes from salary to an independent contractor. Why is that important? It's no secret. If you're an independent contractor, you don't get medical benefits and you don't get a health care plan. So she is absolutely in the right for doing this. And one other quick point. She stated that about 20% of the time spent by workers in the office is attributed to other type of work that you can't do at home. So she does have a legitimate argument.
Yeah. And Kelly, Amanda Mull at The Atlantic, kind of picking up on Brian says there, The Atlantic wrote the following here. Employers are trying to figure out what they can get away with down the line, and workers are trying to figure out what they can demand. Now that many American companies have been forced to adapt to remote work life, there are good reasons to demand continued flexibility from your employer and good reasons to believe you could get it. I mean, there's no doubt here. Both sides, Kelly, are jockeying for position.
No, absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. And I think it's important to remember that according to a recent Gallup poll, a majority of people support working from home. It gives them flexibility. They can take their lunch break when they need to. If they have a Zoom meeting or a meeting, they can get ready for it. And that's what a majority of people want and should be allowed. And my hats go off to the people for basically protesting, to standing up and saying, taking a position and going to strike because of this. Because we have to remember that people just can't be classified. You can't just say, oh, you're an independent contractor. The real issue is how much the employer has control over someone. And if they have control, then the argument can be made that they're not an independent contractor and an employee and are entitled to benefits.
Kelly brought up the Gallup poll, so I want to put this on the screen if I can for you, Brian. It says, 56% of U.S. workers working remotely all or part of the time. That's a pretty big number, right? 23% of all workers would stay remote if given the option. So that's a chunk of people who do not want to come back. And the question is, how do these companies navigate that?
Well, I've got bad news, Trace, for those folks that don't want to come back to work in the office, because most employees, Trace, across the country are what's called at-will employees. Most employees don't have written contracts that say you can only be fired for a cause. So if you're an at-will employee in most states across the country, like these staff members probably are, their employer can fire them pretty much for any reason. So if they don't want to come back in the office, they're probably going to be looking at a termination.
Yeah, and I read one op-ed, Kelly, that said, for those workers who think that they have the right to stay home and don't have to come back to work, it is going to be a very rude awakening for them come close to the first of the year. What do you think?
Well, I think it's important for people to let their voice be heard. And as I said before, my hats off go to the people to get out there and strike for it. I think that's really important for people to do that. But maybe there can be some kind of hybrid. Some people can work at home part-time and then allowed to be in the office as well and have some flexibility.
Yeah. But there's this conflict, and I'll give you both like 10 seconds to close. And there's this conflict because, as Brian was saying in the initial part of this, there are people who have had to come in every single day, and there are people who have stayed home every single day since this pandemic. And so there's some animosity in a lot of these workplaces around the country. You talk to people and they're like, yeah, I've been going in, they've been staying home, doesn't seem fair. 10 seconds. Brian.
Yeah. Trace, this is about personal responsibility. The employer writes the check. If you want to earn a check, you got to get your butt into the office.
Yeah. Kelly, final word?
I think it's important that people allowed flexibility in a hybrid. If they have children, it's hard to do everything and work at home and work in the office. But ultimately, if the employer forces them, then they'll have to make that decision.
Kelly Hyman, Brian Claypool, good of you both. Thank you.